In 2019, YouTube was caught violating the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA. Since settling, YouTube has enacted new policies that are meant to serve as a smokescreen so they can dodge responsibility and scapegoat creators. As such, for my own protection, it is my obligation to advise you that this video is not aimed at children. My target audience is not children. Parental discretion is advised. Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Today, we will be looking at Master, released in March of 2021, directed by Jason Haig Ellery and Jamie Anderson. Master stars Eric Roberts as the Master and Chase Masterson as Vienna Salvatore. Also featured in the cast are Laura Aikman, Alistair Petrie, and Nicholas Briggs as the Daleks. I will try to avoid them, but just in case, there is a blanket spoiler warning in place. I do these unscripted. So, if you do not want to be spoiled, in the description box below will be the link to Big Finish's website where you can buy Master. And I am so happy with how Master turned out. If you'll recall, late last year when I did my top 10 most anticipated Big Finish releases of 2021, Master was number one. It was the thing I was most looking forward to this year. And it did not disappoint at all. I am so happy. I'm also really happy with the redemption Big Finish has given the Eric Roberts Master. The more I see of Eric Roberts and the more familiar with him I become, he strikes me as the kind of actor who needs a really good director, and the actor and director need to have a really good bond. And that does not seem to be what happened with the TV movie. And I've become more and more convinced that what happened with the Eric Roberts Master in the TV movie was not Roberts' fault, but the director's. And all of his Big Finish stuff has kind of proven that. The Lifeboat and the Deathboat from the Diary of River Song Series 5, Day of the Master from Ravenous 4, Masterful, and now Master, which to date is his best outing. Eric Roberts is absolutely spectacular here, and especially because this is such a unique Master, at least in terms of motivation. You know, how to approach that? How to approach the character? This particular character of the Master. So the Master, at least at this point, at least the classic Masters, have had one of two motivations, one of three motivations: global or universal conquest, personal gain of some sort, or survival, plain and simple. For example, the Jeffrey Beavers and Peter Pratt incarnations of the Master were at the end of his life. That's why his body was so decayed. He'd been trying to prolong his life to stay alive. Whereas Masters like Roger Delgado, they weren't at that point yet. There was still a longevity to them that they could, where they could seek personal gain. Or the Anthony Ainley Master. This was a body the Master possessed, but because of how he possessed it with the powers of the Keeper and the Trocken Union, it granted him a stability that he could continue his goals of personal gain. The Eric Roberts Master is sort of like the Anthony Ainley Master, but with different motivations. So, because of presumably the powers of the Deathworm Morphins, or the fact that Bruce the paramedic was a human, this Master's body isn't stable the way the Tremas Master Anthony Ainley was. So, and even more so than the Decaying Master Jeffrey Beavers and Peter Pratt, this Master is motivated by a survival instinct, unlike any of the others, really. And in doing so, in his pursuits, this Master is much more animalistic in his pursuits. He's much more bestial. And, I really think this story really, well, I think Master explores that really well, that side of the Master. Not so much the more animalistic side of the Master. I think there's a moment in the first story, but then after that, that does get kind of dropped. It's still there a little bit, but especially in the allusions and the references the Master makes, but it's not to the same degree that, say, the TV movie did, which is buried under heaps and loads of camp. Anyway, so the stories themselves, Master contains 3 stories. Um, Faustian by Rob Valentine, Prey by Robert Whitelock, and Vengeance by Matt Fitton. And so Master doesn't even open with the Master. Actually, that's something interesting. Unlike the Big Finish's other 2 Master spin-offs, the War Master and Missy, the Master isn't a protagonist here. And when I say protagonist, I don't mean hero, because in all of their series, the Master has never been portrayed as heroic. But I mean, the Master here is not a protagonist, as in, he is not the POV character, whereas in the other 2 spin-offs, the War Master and Missy very much are. But no, a lot of it are interactions surrounding the Master. There are other characters who we follow rather than the Master himself. And one of them is who Faustian opens with, Dr. Lila Krieg, a scientist who is working on teleportation experiments, essentially. It's a little bit more than that, but that's the basics, teleportation experiments. And that's kind of the big thing I'll say with Faustian. Faustian draws a lot of parallels with the Master of Callus, the War Master Series 2, not the Master of Callus, its opening story, Call of the Dead, where you have a main character who has this goal and objective, and the Master sort of worms their way into the character's mind, trying to convince them, to ally with him, to side with him. And the main character tries to push it off for as long as possible, even as their life, their personal life, keeps getting worse, and the Master's offer becomes more and more enticing. But that's only the broad strokes, because Faustian and Call of the Dead are actually very different stories. For example, really, the Master is brought back in Faustian, I think in the halfway point of the story. Anyway, I should have talked about the world, too. So Master has a very cyberpunk setting, kind of like Transit, the Doctor Who novel by Ben Aronovich, which, go to Security Kitchen Productions and check out the audio drama adaptation of Transit. But the Earth that Master is set in is set after the Daleks invaded it. I don't know if this takes place after the first invasion, the Dalek invasion of Earth, or the second one, Lucy Miller to the Death. But point is, it takes place in a society trying to rebuild after the Daleks invaded. And there's this very cyberpunk feel to it that really mostly comes into play in the second story when we talk about it. But anyway, so yeah, Laura Aikman plays Lila Krieg, who I just talked about. And she gives a really good performance. She has a strong character arc throughout the entire series too, She has tunnel vision, she's narrow-minded, focused only on her goals. Excuse me. And, she accepts the Master's offer very easily. And, through her partnership with the Master, she starts to sort of sink to his level, is the quickest way to explain it. Only by the end to realize, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to become this. And, sort of pull herself out of the darkness. Like I said, it's a really compelling arc across all 3 stories for Lila. At the start of the story, she's working for a man named Magnus Drake, whose company, Drake Interplanetary, is kind of at the forefront of restoring Earth. Essentially, he is the most powerful man on Earth right now. And he's not a good character. He's very kind of two-dimensional. He's sort of, he's the corporate villain. And but the stories do interesting things with him, and I'll talk about that more um, when I talk about Vengeance, because he has a major role in Faustian and Vengeance, but he doesn't have a role in Prey at all. Is there anything else I want to talk about? Well, no. Also, over the course of this, yeah, I'll just move on. So, through the course of this series, an assassin is hired to kill the master, Vienna Salvatore, who, after appearing in Doctor Who, in a Doctor Who audio, excuse me, got her own spin off, which is canon. Screw you, TARDIS Wiki. Anyway, so Vienna Salvatore is an assassin and bounty hunter, and she was paid to kill the master. So she doesn't come in until the second story, Prey, but you know, she is a major player for Prey and Vengeance. I don't know why I struggle so hard with the titles. And Vienna's great. I haven't heard any of the Vienna stuff, but this series actually did convince me to check it out. Vienna is kind of that assassin with the heart of gold, you know, like she says the job she takes, she only accepts if the hit balances things out for the better. And that's what obviously killing the master would do. And she's trying to get out of this business and start a better life. And Chase Masterson makes the character a lot of fun. I loved her snark. I loved throughout throughout Prey, she's partnered with a robot who is basically made to be her assistant during this hit, named who she nicknames Artie. And their rapport is really good. It's one of the strongest parts of Prey. I also mentioned with Prey that this is where the cyberpunk setting comes into play the most. Like, you have the corporations, and then you have sort of the slums. You know, they're sealed off from the rest of the outside world. There's no rule of law in them. And, you know, various gangs compete and vie for control of the slums. You know, after Vienna's assassination attempt on the master, he's forced to flee into these slums where he encounters one of the gang leaders. And, you know, like I said, that's Prey. Here, Prey is the weakest story in the set, but it's where most of the world building happens. So, you know, it is good for that, you know, because Prey is really developing what the world is like after the Daleks invaded. And sure enough, as I mentioned, the Daleks do come back in the final story, Vengeance by Matt Fitton. And Vengeance is really good too. This is a strong set overall, but Vengeance might be my favorite story in this set. So basically, the Daleks, once again, are trying to invade Earth for the third time, potentially. But there's more to it than that, because this plan is secretly led by a new Dalek variant introduced called the Dalek Litigator. Dalek Litigator. I I don't know why, but that gets such a laugh out of me. The Daleks have a lawyer. It's such a stupid, goofy idea, and I love it so much. But there is a precedent for it, because as you remember, the TV movie opens with the Master placed on trial by the Daleks. And, you know, that's where the movie starts. They exterminate him for his many crimes, which this story elaborates on, just his crimes against the Daleks. And then the Doctor has to take his remains back to Gallifrey, which, of course, the Master sabotages from beyond the grave. Oh, but that's a bit of a tangent. So basically, you know, despite this being presented as an invasion of Earth, it's actually a front, because the Dalek litigator wants to make sure that the Master sufficiently pays for his crimes, because when they learn he's alive, you know, that obviously doesn't fly with the Daleks. And this is where Eric Roberts really gets to shine, because on top of being animalistic and bestial, as I mentioned, He's also very charming. He's very charismatic. And that's what makes this master work because when he presents deals, unlike some of the other masters, he's so suave and charming that you're very easily swayed by him, you know? He very seldom has to hypnotize people. Also, this is obviously where Roberts is having the most fun. In terms of tone, I would set I would set Master between the dark Shakespearean tragedy of the War Master and the light-hearted, insane romp of Missy. It's kind of the perfect middle ground. There's a lot of humor. It can get very dark, but it doesn't really go too far into either extremes. And like I said, I think Vengeance is the best example of that. Like him and the Master and Lila have mount up this assault against the Daleks, and he's orchestrating everything. And he's like, "Okay, watch the shields, pilot the drone. Okay, watch the shields, keep an eye on the Daleks, pilot the drones." And then Lila asks, "What about you? What are you gonna do?" And the Master's just like, "Me? I have a big gun." Like, and the humor is really good too. Like, it's the moments are few and far between, but they never feel out of place, and they're very well executed. Vengeance also has some interesting notes. Like, so here's where the big spoiler is. At the end of Faustian, the Master kills Magnus Drake and assumes his identity. And in Vengeance, it's revealed that Drake keeps clones of himself, and he has his memories and his mind saved onto a computer, and whenever he dies, he uploads his mind into a new clone. He's essentially found a way to keep himself immortal. And Drake is the one who hired Vienna to kill the Master. If there is one thing I'm disappointed in, it's that the way this story had to end. The ending is really good, don't get me wrong, but it's the way this story has to end because of continuity. So, at the end of the movie, the Master is trapped in the vortex, or the Eye of Harmony of the Doctor's TARDIS, depending on who you ask. I'm just going to say the vortex, it's easier that way. So, stories with the Master have to take place in the vortex, like the lifeboat and the death boat, or they have to have him pulled out of the vortex. And this is specifically the Roberts Master. But by the end of the story, he has to be sent back into the vortex, because when the Eric Roberts body, because this Master is another possession, it's not a regeneration, when the Eric Roberts body dies out, the Jeffrey Beavers Master takes over, and that is the form in which he escapes the vortex. So, like, I would love to see more of the Eric Roberts Master, but I feel like because of where he has to end, there's very little you can do with that. But beyond that, though, Master is brilliant. Like, it features a strong, redemptive performance for what may have been, for the longest time, the most maligned Master in the entire series. If you're familiar with Doctor Who, if you've at least seen the movie, I highly recommend seeking Master out. And like I said, despite featuring another character from another spin-off, you don't need to have heard any of the spin-off material to know who Vienna is. Like, check it out. It like I said, it was the release I was most anticipating for, and not only did it not disappoint, it seriously exceeded my expectations. But those are just my thoughts on Master. What are yours? Have you heard it? Start a conversation in the comments below. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. And in the description box below, you can follow me. You can find the link to my Twitter where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is the Sentinel watching over Geekdom, and I'll see you guys next time.